has an incredible story, and so many times when someone has such an incredible testimony, there are those that will hear that testimony and then they'll try to minimize it, or they'll say, "Oh, I don't believe that. That's too fantastic." I can tell you from experience of what happened to me. When God gets a hold of you like that, it's always a miracle. It's always fantastic. So Leon, are you ready to share with them?
Yes, I am.
All right, and you go ahead and just tell them your story the same way that you told me. And when you're done, I've got a few scriptures that I'd like to share about that. So go ahead.
Thank you, Pastor Brian. My name's Leon Henderson. Born in 1950 to a very, very poor house. Our house had a dirt floor in it. A very abusive dad, very, very abusive dad. Whenever I was 5 years old, I had a half-brother and a half-sister, and then two sisters are of my own. When I was 5 years old, my stepbrother sexually abused me. And I tried to tell my mom, and she just liked to beat the fire out of me. Well, that went on, and if I wasn't going to school, I had to stay at home. I couldn't go nowhere else. I couldn't go out, and if Mother got tired of me being around the house, she'd make Daddy take me to work with him. And when he'd take me to work with him, I had to get in the floor, lay down in the floorboarded pickup. It was an old 53 Ford pickup. And most of the time, while we was going down the road, he'd be stomping on me while we was going to where he's working. Well, time went on and went on. And I finally got into junior high. I was 16 when I went into junior high. And at that time, that was 1966. At that time, they was putting a tally up on TV every night of the men that got into Vietnam, junior high. Vietnamese that got killed. A lot of people that went to school with, that was being drafted at one at that time. Friends in school. That was 1966. At that time, they was putting a tally up. I don't know if I tried to be friendly. I was just the Vietnamese that got killed. And my stepbrother had went in the Marine Corps at that time. And I was always told that I would never measure up to that man at that time. You'll never be as good as him. You'll never do anything. And when I was 16, I went home. And I was gone for a year. And when I turned 17, I went back to work. My mother and dad was, and I told them, I said, I told my mother, and when she seen me, she said, "Well, where you been?" So she said. And I said, "I'm going to join the Marine Corps." Well, I thought she was going to punch me right between the eyes. She was probably as mean as my dad. And so I left. And at that time, I got a job at a Texaco gas station. And I was real proud of the job I had at Texaco gas station. And the guy that owned the gas station was retired out of the Marine Corps. And he told me, he said, "Son, that's what you really need to do." So I went down to the Marine recruiter's office. And he said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 17. He said, "Well, apparently you didn't graduate from school." He said, "But that don't make any difference." He said, "Will your folks sign for you?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, we'll fill out these papers and we'll go out to work. Your mother is." We knocked on the door and she said, "I ain't signing them papers. You got to take him out there where his dad's working. Make him sign them." we pulled up, and as I got out of the recruiter's car, my dad seen me get out, and he come. He wasn't trotting, but he was walking, fast toward me. And as he got toward me, he drew his fist back like he's going to hit me. That's the first time in my life I ever had anybody to take up for me. He stepped in between me and my dad, and he said, Mr. Henderson, you are fixing to make a very, very big mistake. I'm telling you right. And he was a pretty good-sized Marine. Well, that was February the 4th. I say I enlisted in February the 5th, but I went to the indoctrination center on February the 5th in Oklahoma City. I flew to San Diego, California, February the 5th. February the 6th, I wound up in the Naval Hospital in San Diego, Balboa Naval Hospital, with a skull fracture, brain concussion, and severe nerve damage. They made me ride on the bus all the way from the airport out to the Marine base, and then the drill instructor, whoever he was, had me by the arm. He said, the only problem with you is you're drunk. And I'm thinking, I don't even drink. Anyhow, they kept me in sick bay that night, and they sent me over to the Naval Hospital on a bus the next day. Well, whenever I got to the Naval Hospital, from the new building to the old building was an archway, and I remember looking up, and there was this man. He was an officer. I knew his officer. I didn't know what rank he was. They had put a piece of paper in my pocket where they admitted me to the hospital. And he pushed me to where I was going. Well, apparently it was X-ray room. Well, whenever I got in there, I was deathly sick. And I upchucked in one of these old brown waste paper cans, like they used to have, old metal cans. It was nothing but just pure blood. And I'm thinking, what's I tried to get away from this stuff. What's happening? Well, they admitted me to the neurosurgical ward in Balboa Hospital, where, the doctor that W.B. Driscoll was my doctor, Captain W.B. Driscoll. And he told me, he said, son, something had hit you awful hard for that skull to break and cut that nerve to your left ear. So it was back before NCIS. It was NIS, Naval Intelligence Investigative Service. They did an investigation, and they said it wasn't due to misconduct. It was in line of duty, but they don't know what happened. They could not find out what happened. Well, after I went for the Naval Discharge Review Board, and they said, Naval Discharge Review Board said unfit for duty on account of these injuries. Well, the Marine Corps said, nah, we ain't gonna accept that. So they put me in a holding company, and they started hitting me and knocking me around on my head. I told them, I said, and please don't hit me. I think I had just turned 18, and it kept on. Well, it didn't take long before I found a hole in the fence, and I took off. Well, I turned myself in after a year. because we just kept waiting on the line, waiting. So my folks had moved to Arkansas. And I went to Arkansas State Trooper and I turned myself in. And I went back and they locked me in the brig for 2 years. I said, why am I locked up? They said, for safekeeping. I said, from safekeeping from what? They would never tell me. Woke up time for my court martial. The military defense, Captain Leo Pappas, we were sitting outside of the general's office, the commander of Marine Corps MCRD in San Diego. He said, Leon, I'm only a captain, and every officer in there is higher ranked than me. I can only say so much. Well, he showed me how to log in, showed me how to stand in front of the general's desk. And that general was a very, very mean man, or his words were very mean. And he had a piece of paper. He said, if you do not sign for this discharge, I'll promise you that you'll spend the rest of your life in the military prison in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I'm thinking, why I didn't do nothing. But military defense said, you can't say nothing to him because he's a general. And I'm standing there, I signed it. Well, over that, they took all my constitutional rights away. I can't vote, I can't be on any government property. Back before the government sold the post office, I couldn't even go to the post office, but I got called to the post office. That was automatic 5 years in a federal penitentiary. So, at that time, there's not many people that remembers back in the 60s and 70s at the end of Vietnam. There was either Vietnam veterans or they were hippies. Well, I wasn't no hippie. And I didn't fit in with the veterans. And so I thought, well, I'm getting me a motorcycle because from what I've seen, people that ride motorcycles, they don't have to explain anything to anybody. So I became a biker. Didn't ever ride with a gang. I was what was called an independent. I started working offshore. I worked down. That's the first time I went to work in the oil field. I started offshore in what was called Worms Corner. I worked offshore for Rowing International out of Houston for 2 years, about 2 years. And the rig was supposed to go over in the North Sea, and I didn't want to go, I didn't know nothing about the North Sea, but I knew I didn't want to go that far away from the United States. So I come back on shore and start running heavy equipment. Well, I still wasn't getting along with my dad. My dad did not like me none whatsoever, and I had no idea why. But I was out on where he was he was watching over his man's cows. He was supposed to be a ranch manager, but I was, Anyhow, I was walking down the road toward a gate down into the pasture, and he threw a rock at me. Then he hit me and went by the side of me. And I turned around, and he's got a smirk grin on his face. Never talked, never cussed my dad, never hit him. But I walked back and I told him, I said, you had no idea what you're doing or who you're messing with. And I got on the motorcycle and left. Well, if anything needed to be done, he would ask Mom and ask me to come and do it. Because course, I would because I could do it, and they were still my folks, even though, I was running a bulldozer at the time. I was cleaning up oil field locations. After they get finished drilling, it looked like a cyclone's been there. Would have been cleaned up locations, and for a while on my mind is go to Colorado, go to Colorado, go to Colorado. I'd lay down to go to sleep. I'd wake up and go to Colorado, go to Colorado. And I couldn't figure out what that was coming about. So I told my mom one day, I said, I've been for quite a few months, I've been having this strong feeling inside I'm supposed to go to Colorado. And she said, I loaded all my stuff up in a cardboard box. And didn't have a suitcase then, I had a cardboard box. And she took me to the bus station over Seminole, Oklahoma, and I caught a bus to Denver. Well, I just got paid. And I got to Denver, and I thought, well, I'll look for a job of a morning, and I was a drunk. I was not, didn't have anything to do with God. Because they told me, they said, your relationship with God compared to the relationship with your dad. And I'm thinking, as powerful as what I've heard God is, and me have, no, I don't have nothing to do with that man. So I got to Denver, and I remember going to one bar, and then I woke up, and I didn't have no boots on. My head hurt, and I thought, what is this? What's going on? God, why you don't even like me, do you? I managed to get to downtown Denver, and there was a little old shady hotel in downtown Denver. Downtown at that time, was pretty trashy. I walked inside, and the man moved like I had a heart attack. What's wrong? He said, have you seen your face? And I said, no, sir. I walked in the bathroom, turned the light on, and I couldn't even see my eyes, and they were so swelled shut and so much blood on my head. Well, he called the police while I was in the bathroom, and whenever they walked in, the first police officer, he just called me on the arm. He said, son, you need to go with us. And I thought, well, here we go again. They took me down to Denver General. And I stayed all night in Denver General. And like I said, I didn't have no boots. They'd stole my boots, stole my watch, I had a real nice lion's head, gold lion's head ring with a diamond in its mouth. It stole it. Stole a calculator that I carried in my pocket because I'm not real good with numbers. I do all my numbers on a calculator. I'm pretty handy with a calculator now. I learned how to use a calculator. And then they stole it. Well, I walked around Denver, and I wore they gave me a little pair of paper shoes. And I walked around Denver until I wore holes on the balls of my feet, the paper off that. And I wore holes where I could look at my feet and I could see the tendons where I'd wore them out so much. I was having to walk on the sides of my feet. Right across from the Capitol in Denver is Cherry Park. It is full of cherry trees. Anybody ever been to Denver, been around the Capitol? That's why they call it Cherry Park. I went down there and I was sitting there and I got up thinking, didn't have no money, didn't have nothing to smoke, and ain't coffee in a while. And so I walked, and just maybe a block and a half, there was a bridge that went over a little river and then over the interstate. I walked, and I thought, well, I'll go down on that bridge, I can, get away from everybody on the bridge. And that old man on that bridge, and he, nicest man that I've ever met. Well, no, one of the nicest men that I've ever met. He said, would you like a cup of coffee? I said, yeah. He said, well, I got this out of the dumpster probably about 3 weeks ago, and I've used it up pretty much. He said, but you're welcome to a cup of it if you want. I said, yes, sir. Well, it wasn't nothing but colored water, but I drank it anyhow. He said, I bet you smoke, don't you? I said, I sure do. He said, well, do you know how to roll a cigarette? And I said, yes, sir, I sure do. Well, I sat down there and visited with him. And then I just was at the point where I had that, I don't know, if somebody would say, I'd say, I don't know. Because I had nothing going on in my mind. I don't know. I walked back up to Cherry Park and I'd sit down under a tree. I was tired. My feet was hurting real bad. And they was maybe a block away, but it was still there in the park. They was having something going on. And I laid back against the tree and I looked, and there's this guy over there looking at me. I thought, I don't need nobody coming over here talking to me. And I dug my head down, and whenever I raised my head up, he was standing right there. He said, are you a Christian? I said, no. He said, yes, you are. Just ain't been living like one. Hand me a book. It was white. In big black letters said Holy Spirit on it. Well, all of that, I thumbed through the book, never read it. I don't know what happened to the book. For the past years, I've been trying to figure out where that book went. And I had no idea where it went. So when he gave me the book, and I looked at it, and he was gone. He left. And then he come back and he said, are you hungry? I said, am I hungry? He said, I happen to know all the places around Denver that's feeding, and they feed. And we can go from this place to this place to this place to this place, and I can get you full. How would you feel about that? Well, he did. He walked with me all around. I've never seen him eat no other food. So he said, you got any place to stay? And I said, well, if I ain't got nothing to eat, do you think I got some place to stay? So we went to the Denver Rescue Mission. And it was sometime in the afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. And people was lined up blocks and blocks. Well, I got in line, and he was standing by the side of me. And I'm thinking, well, I'm standing here all night. And I looked over there, and he wasn't there. So I'm standing there and standing there. And I seen him come walking down. He said, come on. We walked around all them people into that administrator's office. And he said, administrator said, you need some place to stay? And I said, yeah. I showed him my feet, and I said, I need to stay until my feet get well. And he said, no, you can only stay one night, and then you got to leave. He said, but there's a doctor here right here. Doctor volunteers here once a month. He said, go over there and see about, giving you some medicine for your feet. So I went over there, and as I come walking out of that doctor's office, that guy said, he wants to see you over there. And I went back in there, he said, I've changed my mind. You stay here, you can do stuff around here until your feet get well. I thought, well, good. So I went in, and they had chapel. You had to go to chapel before you could get anything to eat or before you could get in the building. And so I thought, here it goes again. Well, I'm sitting there, and listening, and then my heart just broke. And I went down, and I don't know if it's a priest or whatever it was. He had on a shirt with a collar on it. You know, I called him a priest. I don't know. But he gave me a Gideon Bible. And I went in and got something to eat and laid down in the bed. It was a bed. It was in the military called them a rack. It's an old iron bed with springs, and it's bunk bed. And I would put my feet in the sink and wash them off to kind of stop the hurt, because the medicine the doctor gave me was not working. Well, I think it might have been the next day or a couple of days later, I decided, I need to. I asked the administrator. I went to his office, knocked on the door, and he said, "Hey, I want you to help them cook tomorrow." I said, "I don't know nothing about cooking." He said, "Well, just you can do the dishes or something." I said, "Okay." So I walked outside, and I was still walking on the sides of my feet. And I thought, I'm not going to go back to that park. That guy's going to be there, and I don't have good feelings about him. I really don't want to have nothing to do with him. Well, I walked down to this other park, and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking at that Gideon Bible, and I've got it open, just thumbing through it, not reading it, just, looking like I am. This female walked up, and I didn't look up, but I could tell it was a female by the sound of her voice. She said, "What are you reading?" And I stuck it behind me. I said, "Nothing." She said, "You reading the Bible, ain't you?" And she just left. Well, as I'm sitting there, in my head is killing me. Deep down inside, just like it was, go to Colorado, go to Colorado, go to Colorado. I was told to open the Bible to the back of it. And in the back of a Gideon Bible, you've got the hardcover, and you've got a hard page, and then you've got what's called onion skin. Just cut 2 patches out of that and put on your feet. I thought, boy, Leon, you done smooth went crazy now. So I sat there, and I didn't, and I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll do that." So I cut 2 patches out, and I look around, see if anybody's looking at me, and I used my sock down, I put it on there, and put my sock back up, and did the other one. I hobbled back to the rescue mission, and I laid down, and I dozed off, and I got up and was going to go wash my feet, to clean them up. Pull my socks off and pull that piece of paper off. Both of them was healed. Completely, thoroughly, 100%. I could do this. I went and told the administrator, I said, "My feet's healed." He said, "Well, you can leave tomorrow then." And I'm thinking he's going to give me a couple of days. Well, I'd call my mother in between time, because the guy that I was working for wrote me a check. But she said that he said he wasn't going to give me that check on the way. I just left, and I'd not even told him. I said, "Okay," and I called her from that administrator's office. And no sooner than I got up out of the chair, she called back and said, "That man just pulled in the driveway with your check. Where you want me to send it?" Well, I'd seen a bank, is a bank in Denver. I said, "Well, send it there. I think I can pick it up." Well, I went, give it about 4 hours, and went down there, and I picked it up, come walking out the door, and guess who's standing outside that door? I'm thinking, man, yeah, I'm fit to put a haymaker on you, buddy. Well, he's walking along by the side of me, and I don't know what street we was on or anything, was outside this business, there was a little sitting place made out of concrete. I sat down and he's sitting there. And he said, I'll be back. And I looked and it was a 4-lane intersection, all 4 ways. I looked up and he had plumb across there. He was right behind 2 guys. You know, I'm thinking, what is it with it? He comes back across the street and he said, does this belong to you? And I'm thinking, yeah, buddy, you was in on that, wasn't you? I'm going to get you now. Well, I was able to go to the bus station because once you put your stuff in a bus station, you get the key out, but you got to have money to get your stuff out. And I didn't have no money, but I had a pair of work boots in there, in my box. Well, I got my boots out, and I had talked to, through the period of time, I'd talked to a union representative, and he said, I ain't supposed to tell you this, but they're hiring those operators over on Western Slope. So I got a bus ticket over to Grand Junction, Colorado. Well, as I'm going toward the bus station, this guy's walking along beside of me. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm finna get you in the alley now. We get in the bus station. I get my ticket. He ain't nowhere around. I start to get on the bus. And I look, and there he was right there. Well, we're getting on the bus and start over down the mountain. There's a little place called Eagle, Colorado. There is no exit for it, or there wasn't at that time. The bus stopped on the interstate and opened the door, and he got off. Oh, back before that, there was a Mexican man sitting across the aisle, and he was drinking whiskey. He kept holding that bottle out, and I couldn't reach and take it. One wanted to drink, but I couldn't reach over and take it. He'd hold it down, I couldn't reach over and take it. Well, the bus stopped and let this guy off. And I got to Grand Junction, got a job. The guy I went to work for said he would not give me no advance on any money, but he would pay for my hotel bill that I could stay in a hotel. And he would pay the bill and hold it out of my check. Well, that's all I wanted to do. So I'm praying one night, and at that time I started to an Assemblies of God church. You know, trying to keep up with what had started in Denver. Well, I was down the best way that I knew how, down at the foot of my bed, like this, and I said, God, I sure would like to know that man's name that helped me so I could pray for him. And it was just like somebody hit me in the chest with her fist and knocked me back prostrate. Said, that was not no man, that was your guardian angel. You know, I got to working and things got to going pretty well, and next thing I know, I got to making a lot of money. More money than I made in Oklahoma. This stuff started being put in front of me, and then Jesus and the angel got put on the back burner for a period of time. But he's a very powerful God. I've been through 3 cancer surgeries, 3 back surgeries, a quadruple bypass where all 4 of them was 98% locked. And you ladies that know me remember when those one of them was only 83% blocked, and that heart surgeon said, well, that heart attack's what blocked that one. That's why he's still alive. He told Leah, he said, you're very fortunate you didn't find him out in the backyard dead with that much blockage. And it didn't happen overnight. You know, and there's still tough times. But my most favorite scripture in the entire world is Philippians. It's on my water glass. 4, 6, and 7. By prayer and supplication, make your request known to God. Then the peace of God that transcends all human understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. And that's what I try. I try to see that every day. You know, like I said, there's tough times, but I've got a tougher God. You know, when the smoke settles, he's standing there with the furnace door open. And there's a lot of my story that I didn't tell because that's like, you know, we'd had to bring lunch, you know, but this is important, very important part to me, was about the angel. Oh, one other part is the first night when he asked me that he didn't take me to the rescue mission the first night. He took me to a boxcar. And he said, he opened the door and he said, get in. There were flat cardboard boxes. He took them and, you know, built me up a stack, and I laid down. And he took one and laid on top of me, and I'm thinking, and I had no idea that cardboard box ain't gonna keep me warm. I was as warm as if I'd have been laying on a beach in Florida. The next morning I felt whenever I thought it was whenever the train hooked up to that boxcar. Just as soon as it hit, the door came open and that guy was standing there. I've had people that try to poo-poo on that story, but it's in my door. And Leah has heard me tell him, she says, I don't know, you telling the truth, you tell it the exact same way every time you told it. You know, there's some of the stuff I left out, you know. But the main thing is, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to share. And God is real. Angels are real. You know, and when you're in dire straits, He'll send what He needs to send to correct the situation.
So, like Leon was saying, there are some people that deny that angels will work in our lives, and they'll either say, well, I don't believe that, that's a bunch of fairy tale stuff, or they'll say, well, that used to happen in the Old Testament, that doesn't happen today. What does Psalms 91:11 say? Anybody remember that? For He shall give His angels charge over you to keep you in all ways. And there are many other scriptures that talk about that. Sometimes we see our angels, as Leon experienced, where in every instance where someone has told me a story about an angel darting over them and helping them like that, in every instance, they didn't realize until the situation was completely over with that it was an angel. It wasn't a situation where they knew from the beginning all the way through the story. It was just some man that was helping them. This man did these things for me. Every time I was in trouble, this man would show up. And when I would turn around to thank him, he wasn't there. And sometimes our angels are there protecting us and we don't even see when it happens. I had an experience many years ago when I was a young man, running a little skid steer front end loader out in California. And if you've ever been out there where the hills are in California, they are so steep. The hills in this part of the world, the hills aren't very steep and they're very rounded at the bottom and they go up to the next hill. In California, where the hills come together, it's literally like this. You can come up and set your foot where the two hills come together, and it's steep. And it was my job to carry dirt around behind this little house and add on to the side of this hill so that they could extend this house out. And I was driving back in there with that skid steer and dumping that dirt, coming out and getting another load. I've been doing that all day long. And it was about almost quitting time. And I was beginning to think about quitting time, and my belly was making me think about what I was going to eat for dinner that night. And I went in to dump the last load, and when I drove in there to dump that last load, all of a sudden the side of the hill gave way under me. And the machine rolled over on its side like that and started down the hill, and I could see out the window beside me, and there's nothing but a hole way down in the bottom. And all I had time to do was say, "Help me, Jesus." And suddenly that skid steer just stopped moving. Right on the side of that steep hill, it just stopped. I sat there and I waited, and they went and got one of the trucks and another piece of equipment, and I couldn't move because every time I'd moved, it would shift. And they got hooked onto the back of me, and they drugged me up out of that hole, and we looked down in there, and there was a tree right where that skid steer had slid up against. There was no tree there when I was moving that dirt. But all of a sudden, there was a tree there when I needed it to be there. And the Lord had his guardian angels watching out. There was another time when I had a problem with the clutch on a pickup, and sitting at an intersection with my foot on the clutch. And if you've ever driven a Standard, a lot of us will do that and leave it in gear. And I had it in gear and my foot on the clutch all the way on the floor, and all of a sudden the truck just lurched right out in the middle of the intersection and died with a fully loaded semi-saltwater tank truck coming at me. I was frozen, and again, all I had to do was say, "Oh Lord, help me." And suddenly the truck, on level ground, the truck suddenly rolled backwards like it was downhill, and the truck passed in front of me and missed me. When you experience some things like that in your life, and you're a student of God's Word, and you listen to the testimonies of other people, you begin to realize, as I've said to you before, you have to live your life in a way that either everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. And for me, I know that those times weren't coincidences. They weren't happy accidents. They were times that God's guardian angels grabbed a hold of my piece of equipment and stopped it, grabbed a hold of my truck and drugged me out of the way, or in your case, led you around to every place you needed to be where you needed to be, when you needed to be there, to get you a copy of God's Word, to get your feet healed, to get you food in your belly. And if we'll begin to look at our lives, we really need to realize so many people are so caught up in all of this stuff is because of me. I work hard. All this stuff is because of me. I'm good at what I do. We need to realize that all the things that are good in our lives are because of God, because of his guardian angels, because we belong to him and he's watching out for us. I know many people that have told me, they've given me their testimonies of how they were protected when they weren't a Christian yet. They weren't even a believer, and yet they were supernaturally protected because God knew who they were going to become. God knew that they were one day going to be saved. He had a use for them. And it's the same this experience you had was prior to your salvation. He was doing that to get you where you needed to be for the day you would become his, for the work he had for you to do. And sometimes the things that happen in our life that appear at the time to be a tragedy are used of God. You remember the story of Joseph in Egypt, and his brothers had intended to kill him, and then they decided, well, no, we won't make any money if we do that. Let's just sell him. And he wound up in Egypt in slavery, and all these bad things happened to him, and suddenly, miraculously, his life began to turn around. Things miraculously got better. And then when he saw his brothers, our human nature would say, oh boy, here you come. Guess what's fixing to happen to you? Now the shoe's on the other foot, right? That's what our human nature wants to do. But instead, he said to his brothers, what you did, you meant for evil, but God meant it for good, that on this day, 2 nations would be saved. Not only to save the Hebrew nation, but to save the Egyptian nation, so that God could use them in the future. In the case of the Hebrew nation, to bring them out of Egypt in the Exodus and to bring the Savior through them. In the case of the Egyptians, to save them so that God could show his power in the Exodus. But God saved 2 peoples through that one situation, happened to that one guy. It seems so horrible. When we're reading God's word, we see that and we think, how tragic, how horrible, how terrible. But yet God meant it for good. And we see that throughout the scriptures. Every time these horrible circumstances take place, God uses those circumstances and turns around and uses them for good. Amen? Well, that's going to conclude our service tonight. I appreciate y'all's listening to Leon as he shared his testimony about his experience. I managed not to cry all the way through it this time, but as he was telling me at his place on the river on Thursday, I wept nearly through the whole story. But it's good that we share our testimonies with each other to encourage one another. It's also good that we share our testimonies so that others can realize when they need to be watching when these things happen in their life. They're not accidents. They're not coincidences. They are your God who loves you. And he's doing these things to use you for his purpose. You need to look and see, am I allowing myself to be used? Am I being used for my purpose? You need to constantly be asking yourself that. If you're being used, if you're doing what God's called you to do, good. But in most cases, we're not. We either aren't at all, or we're not doing it to the level that he calls us to. Amen? I would encourage y'all to do that. Be introspective this week and look and see what God's calling you to do and what he would have you to do. Amen? All right. Well, we'll close in prayer. Y'all ready? Deborah, would you like to lead us in prayer? Leon, thank you, brother.